It happened on a foggy morning at the pier, a moment that would shake the entire police department and leave the world questioning everything they thought they knew about loyalty. Officers stormed toward a man in camouflage, shouting commands. Tourists froze. Children cried. And right in the middle of the chaos sat a Navy SEAL, bruised, exhausted, and clutching a German Shepherd like he was holding on to the last piece of his world. "Release the canine," the sergeant barked. The officers hesitated, but only for a moment. The canine handler gave the command. The dog lunged forward, but what happened next silenced everyone. Instead of attacking, the canine skidded to a stop, stared at the SEAL, and then did the unthinkable. He ran to the man, whimpering, tail low, nudging him like he had found his missing brother. No one understood why. But when the truth came out, it changed everything. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning fog hung thick over the old wooden pier, swallowing the coastline in a hazy gray silence. Waves slapped gently against the post below, but even the ocean seemed quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. A few early joggers slowed as they noticed the cluster of police cars pulling up near the entrance, lights flashing faintly through the mist. Something was happening. Something serious. Officer Riley adjusted her vest, stepping out onto the slick boards. "Where is he?" she asked, scanning the fog for movement. "End of the pier," another officer replied, already unholstering his pepper spray. "Won't talk. Won't move. He's just sitting there." But then the radio crackled again. "Subject appears military. Possibly dangerous. Proceed with caution." Riley's jaw tightened. Military didn't always mean threat, but it always meant unpredictable. As the fog thinned, the figure came into view, a man in battered Navy camouflage, hunched over on a bench, elbows on his knees. His head was down, shoulders trembling like someone fighting the weight of the world. And pressed desperately against him was a German Shepherd in a tactical vest marked K9 Unit. "What the?" Riley whispered. The man didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the approaching officers. He just held the dog, arms wrapped tight around its neck, as if afraid someone might rip it away at any moment. "Sir," Sergeant Holt barked from behind Riley. "Step away from the animal and identify yourself." No response. Double quotes. "Sir, this is your final warning." Still nothing. Tension crackled through the air. A couple on the pier clutched each other, backing away. Another officer murmured, "He's not even blinking. Something's off." Holt lifted a hand, signaling the team to advance. 5 officers spread out, boots thudding on the wet boards, every step slower, more cautious, more unsure. The Shepherd stiffened, ears twitching, protective but strangely calm. And then Riley noticed something that made her heart skip. The man wasn't gripping the dog like a shield. He was holding it, like he was afraid of losing the only thing keeping him alive. The pier grew silent, and the real story was only just beginning. The officers slowed as they approached, forming a loose semicircle around the bench. Every step echoed across the damp wooden planks, each footfall swallowed halfway by the heavy morning mist. The Navy SEAL still didn't lift his head. His breathing was shallow, uneven, almost like someone holding back pain. Officer Riley raised a hand to signal the others to stay calm, but her instinct screamed that something wasn't right. This wasn't the posture of an aggressive suspect. This was the posture of a man barely holding himself together. The German Shepherd, however, lifted its head immediately. Its dark eyes locked onto the officers with razor-sharp focus, protective, alert, but not hostile. It didn't bark, didn't growl, just pressed itself even closer to the man, as if shielding him from an unseen threat. Sergeant Holt took a step forward. "Sir, this area is restricted. I need you to cooperate and speak to us." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Nothing." The SEAL's fingers tightened in the dog's fur. Officer Mandus whispered, "Why isn't he responding? Is he in shock? Maybe drugs," another officer muttered. Riley shot him a sharp look. "Look at him. That's not drugs." Holt tried again, louder this time. "Sir, do you understand where you are?" Still no reaction. But the dog, its ears flicked back, its muscles tensed. It was tracking every officer's move like it was trained to read danger before it happened. The fog swirled around them, thickening the silence. Finally, the SEAL lifted his head slowly, painfully. His face was pale, eyes hollow, jaw trembling as though he hadn't slept in days. His lips parted, but no words came out. His gaze flicked to the badges, the guns, then back to the dog. And in that moment, Riley realized something chilling. This man wasn't threatening them. He was terrified of them. Whatever brought him here had already broken him long before they arrived. The tension on the pier thickened like the fog itself. Officers exchanged uncertain glances. None of them had ever seen a situation quite like this. A Navy SEAL clutching a police canine, the dog torn between two worlds, and a team of officers unsure whether they were dealing with a threat or a tragedy. Sergeant Holt's radio crackled. Possible armed subject. Be advised he may be unstable. Holt's jaw tightened. The last thing he wanted was an escalation, but protocol was protocol. With the man refusing to comply and the canine behaving unpredictably, they needed control and fast. Riley, Holt murmured, "Step back." She hesitated. "Sarge, he's not acting hostile. That doesn't mean he's safe." The SEAL lowered his head again, shoulders shaking. The dog pressed its body against him, eyes flicking rapidly between every officer. It wasn't choosing sides, it was guarding something fragile, something wounded. Holt exhaled sharply. "All right, enough waiting." He motioned to Officer Dempsey, the department's canine handler. "Deploy your dog. Standard attack posture. We need that shepherd separated from him now." Riley's eyes widened. "Sarge, no, look at him. He's not resisting. That's an order," Holt snapped. Dempsey swallowed hard. His own canine, a powerful Belgian Malinois, stood ready at his side, muscles tensed, awaiting the command. Even he could sense the tension and uncertainty hanging in the air. "On my mark," Dempsey said quietly, gripping the leash. The joggers who had stopped to watch stepped backward. A mother pulled her child behind her. The pier seemed to shrink, every board groaning under the weight of the moment. Dempsey pointed. The Malinois eyes locked on the SEAL and the German shepherd he clung to. "Ready, set." The SEAL looked up, eyes red, hollow, desperate. The shepherd let out a low, trembling whine. "Attack." The Malinois surged, but before its paws even hit full stride, something happened that no one expected. The shepherd's ears snapped upward. Not in fear, not in aggression. In recognition. And everything changed in an instant. The Malinois charged forward, claws scraping against the wet wooden boards. Officers braced themselves, some reaching for tasers, others taking defensive positions. Tourists gasped. Someone screamed. But the German shepherd, the dog in the SEAL's arms, did something no one could have predicted. Instead of tensing for a fight, instead of stepping in front of the SEAL to defend him, instead of reacting like any police-trained canine should, he turned his head. Slowly, deliberately. His ears perked, his eyes widened, his breathing shifted. Recognition washed over him like a lightning strike. And then, just as the Malinois closed the distance, the shepherd broke free. Not to attack, not to run, but to block the charging canine with his own body. Planting his paws firmly on the slick pier, the Malinois skidded, confused, almost losing footing as the shepherd let out a sharp, desperate bark. Not aggressive, not warning, pleading. The SEAL flinched, reaching out instinctively. No, stay," he rasped, but the shepherd wasn't listening. He stood between the SEAL and the attacking canine like a soldier taking a bullet. Dempsey yanked his Malinois back. "What the hell is he doing?" he muttered, stunned. Riley felt her breath catch. "He's protecting him." Holt shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Police K9 South don't just..." But the shepherd wasn't done. He looked back at the SEAL, eyes soft, tail trembling, then pressed his forehead against the man's chest. Before turning again to face the officers, he wasn't confused. He wasn't mistaking anyone's scent. This was loyalty. Pure, unconditional loyalty. And in that moment, every officer on the pier realized this wasn't a random suspect. This wasn't a stolen canine. This wasn't a threat. This was a reunion. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. The fog curled around the officers like a shroud as they stared at the German shepherd standing, guard over the SEAL, chest heaving, stance firm, eyes locked with startling clarity. The Malinois, confused and unsettled, backed away with a low whine, glancing at its handler as if asking for guidance. Officer Dempsey's grip tightened on the leash. This shouldn't be happening," he whispered. "Police K9 South don't react like this without a reason." Sergeant Holt stepped forward, eyes narrowed, trying to make sense of the impossible. Why would a city canine protect a complete stranger? Someone explain it. But no one could. Riley watched the shepherd carefully. His tail wasn't raised, no aggression. His ears weren't pinned back, no fear. His movements weren't random or confused. Everything he did was deliberate, purposeful, emotional. "He knows him," Riley murmured, almost to herself. Holt shot her a sharp look. "That's not possible. Our K9 South are vetted, trained, and assigned through military channels. They don't come with attachments." But the shepherd proved him wrong. He turned his head again, slow, trembling, and nudged the SEAL's arm with his nose, whining softly. The SEAL's hand shook as he rested it on the dog's back, like a man touching a memory he thought he had lost forever. One of the junior officers swallowed hard. Sarge, even if he's not a threat, this whole situation is messed up. Why wouldn't he speak? Why sit out here like this? Why hold the dog like that? Holt didn't answer. For the first time, doubt flickered across his stern expression. Riley stepped closer, voice cautious. Sir, I think we need to slow down. Something's wrong with him. Really wrong. The shepherd shifted slightly, placing himself between the seal and the officers, again gentle but unbreakable. Nothing about this man said danger. Nothing about this dog said disobedient. Everything about them said one thing. They were connected deeply, painfully, and no one knew how. Or why. The German shepherd's protective stance never wavered, even as the officers inched closer. The fog rolled in heavier now, wrapping the pier in a cold, breathless stillness. Every eye was locked on the battered Navy SEAL, waiting, hoping for any sign that he understood what was happening around him. Officer Riley crouched slightly, keeping her voice gentle. Sir, can you hear me? You're safe right now. We just need to know what's going on. For the first time, the SEAL's fingers twitched. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing as if speaking felt like lifting a mountain. His eyes hollow, red-rimmed, exhausted, lifted just enough to meet Riley's. And then, in a voice so weak it barely existed, he whispered, Please, don't take him from me. The officers froze. Riley's heart clenched. That voice didn't belong to a dangerous suspect. It belonged to a man on the edge of breaking. Sergeant Holt stiffened. Nobody's taking anyone. But the SEAL cut him off, shaking his head violently. Tears pooled in his eyes as he clutched the shepherd's fur like a lifeline. You can't separate us again, he rasped. Please. Not again. Riley echoed, exchanging a look with Holt. The SEAL squeezed his eyes shut, breath trembling. He's all I have. He's the only one who made it out with me. The shepherd whimpered softly, pressing closer to him as if the dog understood every unspoken shard of pain. An officer whispered. Made it out. Of what? The SEAL's body shuddered. His voice cracked. The mission. The ambush. The blast. I saw my whole team fall, everyone. He sucked in a sharp, shaky breath. But he stayed with me. He dragged me out. He saved my life. The pier went silent. Even Holt had no words. Riley stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. Sir, who is he to you? The SEAL finally looked up, fully broken, desperate, raw. He's not your canine, he said. He's mine. For a moment, the pier felt frozen in time. No waves, no footsteps, no whispers, just the raw confession hanging in the cold air. Sergeant Holt frowned. What do you mean he's yours? This dog was assigned to our unit 2 years ago. The SEAL closed his eyes, gathering the pieces of a strength he barely had left. His hands trembled against the shepherd's fur. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with memories he had tried and failed to bury. We were deployed together, he whispered. Before he had your vest, before he had your badge, he had a different one, a different life. Riley leaned forward, her expression softening. You were his handler? The SEAL nodded once, slow, painful. His name was Shadow back then, he said, voice thick. He wasn't just a dog. He was my partner, my lifeline. Shadow, hearing the name, lifted his head, ears flicking. Recognition, memory, love. The SEAL smiled through a broken breath. Yeah, buddy, you remember, he continued, each word peeling back a layer of buried trauma. We were sent on a recon mission in the mountains. Quiet night. Too quiet. We didn't see the ambush until it was too late. His voice shook. Explosives, gunfire, chaos everywhere. My team, my brothers, they didn't make it. Shadow pressed his head against the SEAL's chest, letting out a low, mournful whine. I was hit, the SEAL said. Couldn't walk. Couldn't even see straight. His eyes glazed over, reliving the horror. But Shadow, he refused to leave me. He dragged me through dirt and fire and bullets. For miles. Riley covered her mouth, stunned. He kept me alive, the SEAL whispered. When the medevac came, he stood over me like a shield. But when I woke up, he swallowed hard. They told me he'd been reassigned. That military K9S rotate out. That he was no longer mine. His voice finally broke. I tried to find him. Months. Years. But they said he was gone. Lost in the system. He lifted his eyes filled with agony and hope. And now, here he is. My shadow. My partner. My miracle. A heavy silence settled over the pier as the SEAL's words drifted into the mist. Even the officers who had been ready to fire moments earlier now stood rooted in place, shaken by the revelation. Riley exchanged a glance with Holt. This was no ordinary encounter. This was the unraveling of a secret that had been buried far too deep. The SEAL wiped his eyes with the back of his trembling hand. There's something you don't understand, he said quietly. What happened that night wasn't just a mission. It was a classified operation. Most of the details were erased, scrubbed clean. Holt frowned. Classified how? The SEAL looked up, jaw tightening as if choosing his words carefully. Our team was tracking a high-value target in the mountains. We weren't supposed to be detected, but someone leaked our route. Riley's eyes widened. A betrayal. He nodded. We walked straight into a coordinated ambush. RPGs, heavy rounds, mines. You name it. His voice shook. My team never had a chance. Shadow, hearing the tension, pressed closer, resting his head against the SEAL's knee, offering silent comfort. The SEAL continued. I got hit early. Shrapnel in my legs. Blood everywhere. I thought I was done. His breath caught. But Shadow. He wasn't. He stared at the dog with a look that broke every heart on the pier. He dragged me behind rocks. Then he stood over me and fought off the attackers, every single one who tried to get close. Tears welled in his eyes. He took bullets from me. He kept breathing when I couldn't. Riley swallowed hard. How did you make it out? The medevac team found us hours later, he said. Shadow collapsed on top of me, still trying to keep me warm. They airlifted us both. A pause. Then everything went dark. When he woke up in a military hospital, everything had changed. My unit was gone. My records sealed. And Shadow. His voice fractured. They told me he'd been reassigned to police work. That he was government property. That our bond didn't matter. He looked at Shadow, tears slipping down his face. But to him, it still mattered. Sergeant Holt's stern expression faltered for the first time, replaced by something rarely seen on his face: uncertainty. The story unfolding before him didn't align with the clean, controlled image of law enforcement protocol he believed in. The SEAL inhaled shakily. When I recovered enough to walk, the first thing I asked was for Shadow. His voice cracked. They said he was gone. Reassigned. Unavailable. He shook his head, bitter disbelief crossing his features. But you don't just reassign a dog like him. Not one who fought through hell with you. Not one who dragged you out of death. Shadow nudged his hands softly, as if trying to pull him out of the memory. They erased everything. The SEAL continued. The mission logs, the canine pairing records, even the medevac report. His eyes darkened. They didn't want the ambush linked back to the leak, so they buried every piece of evidence, including the bond between us. Riley stepped closer. But why transfer him to the police? Because police departments don't question military dogs sent their way, he whispered. It's common. No one asks why a dog switches branches. They just accept it. Holt exhaled slowly, the pieces finally clicking together. So he's been working with us for 2 years, while you've been searching for him. The SEAL's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Every base I called gave me a different answer. Not here. Not active. No record. They made me feel like I imagined him. He looked down at Shadow, tears gathering again. But I knew he was alive. I felt it. I couldn't explain it, but I felt him. Every day. Shadow lifted a paw, placing it gently on the SEAL's knee, a gesture so deliberate, so heartbreakingly human. The officers felt their chests tighten. Riley whispered, he never forgot you. The SEAL nodded, voice breaking entirely. Neither did I. The fog thickened again, swallowing the edges of the pier as if the world itself wanted to hide the SEAL's pain. The officers stood silent, absorbing every word he'd shared, every wound, every loss, every betrayal that had led him here. Riley spoke gently. If you've been searching for him for years, why come to this pier? Why today? The SEAL lowered his gaze, his hand resting shakily on Shadow's back. Because today, he whispered, was supposed to be my last attempt. Holt's brow tightened. Last attempt. The SEAL nodded, grief etched into every line of his face. I came back home last week after being medically discharged. My legs never fully healed. Nightmares never stopped. He swallowed hard. And everywhere I went, it felt like a world I didn't belong in anymore. Shadow nudged him softly. The SEAL continued. I heard rumors. Whispers from old contacts. Someone thought they'd seen a dog matching Shadow's description working with local law enforcement. His eyes shimmered. I didn't believe it. Couldn't risk hoping again. He exhaled, shaking. So I came here. Walked the city. Watched every police unit that passed. His voice trembled. And then today, I saw him. Riley's breath caught. Where? Right there, he said, pointing toward the street leading to the pier. Your officers had him loaded in the back of a patrol SUV. He was staring out the window. And I knew. Shadow's ears lifted at the memory, tail thumping weakly. I ran after the vehicle. The SEAL whispered. Didn't care how it looked. Didn't care who saw me. I just ran. He sat straighter, emotion choking his words. When you parked here for patrol, I followed. I waited. I prayed. And when they let him out, tears finally spilled down his cheeks. His eyes found mine. He clutched Shadow's fur. And in that moment, I knew my world wasn't over. Sergeant Holt stood stiffly, arms crossed, trying failing to maintain the stern authority he'd carried onto the pier. But the fog, the trembling seal, the loyal shepherd curled against him. It all painted a picture far different from the unstable suspect he had expected still. Protocol warred with compassion inside him. Hear me out, Holt said, voice harder than he intended. You can't just show up behind police units, chase patrol vehicles, and grab hold of a working canine. It looks suspicious, dangerous. You understand that, right? The seal nodded weakly. I know how it looked, but I didn't know how else to reach him. Shadow lifted his head, ears perked, watching the seal with unwavering devotion like he understood every word. Holt continued, frustration softening into something almost apologetic. When we arrived and saw you holding him, silent, shaking, we thought you were trying to steal him. Or maybe you were unstable. We had to react. I wasn't trying to steal him, the seal murmured. I was trying to breathe again. Riley stepped forward before Holt could respond. Sarge. He wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't even standing. He looked like he'd collapsed into that bench. Holt rubbed a hand over his jaw. I know, Riley. Believe me, I see it now. The seal looked up, tears drying on his cheeks. I didn't want trouble. I wasn't hiding. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Holt let out a slow exhale, the kind a man gives when pride and reality collide. You should have talked to us, he said quietly. I tried, the seal whispered. For years. Riley shot Holt a sharp look, one that silently said, This man isn't the problem. Shadow shifted, placing his paw firmly on the seal's boot, anchoring him. Holt watched the gesture, his rigid posture finally softening. He misjudged a man who wasn't dangerous at all, just broken, and holding on to the only piece of his past that still mattered. And for the first time that morning, Holt felt the weight of that mistake, the weight of everything, the ambush, the loss, the years of searching, the shock of reunion crashed over the seal all at once. His breath hitched, shoulders trembling as though the strength he'd been clinging to finally slipped through his fingers. He leaned forward, burying his face in Shadow's fur. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice breaking. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you sooner. Shadow let out a low, aching whine and pressed his entire body against the seal's chest, as if trying to hold him together with his own heartbeat. His tail barely moved, trembling with emotion rather than excitement. The pier fell silent. Even the officers who had been ready to draw weapons just minutes ago now stood frozen, witnessing a reunion deeper than anything protocol could ever define. Riley stepped closer, heart twisting. Sir, you don't have to apologize. None of this was your fault. But the seal shook his head violently, wiping his eyes. I thought I'd lost him. I thought, after the ambush, after waking up alone, they told me he didn't make it. And when I found out he'd been reassigned, I thought they didn't want us together because of everything that happened. And what did happen? Holt asked softly, all authority gone from his voice. The seal swallowed hard. Survivor's guilt. PTSD. They said I wasn't fit for duty anymore. They said letting me reconnect with him would hold me back. His voice cracked. But he's the only thing that ever held me together. Shadow nudged his jaw gently, pulling him from the edge. Riley knelt beside them. You didn't do anything wrong. This was taken from you. The seal looked up, eyes red, voice raw. I just wanted him back, even if it was only for a minute. Holt stepped forward slowly, cautiously. Look, I misread this entire situation. We all did. But now we understand. The seal's lip trembled. Do you? Shadow pressed harder into him. And for the first time since the fog rolled in, Holt nodded genuinely, firmly. Yes, he said. We finally do. The confrontation was over. The truth, unmistakably clear. Sergeant Holt lifted a hand, signaling the officers to pause. This situation had grown far beyond a misunderstanding, and he knew it. He turned to Officer Mendes. Pull the body cam footage, Holt said quietly. From the moment we arrived. Mendes nodded and tapped his radio. Within minutes, two officers returned with the tablets synced to their body cams. Holt motioned for everyone to gather, keeping a respectful distance from the SEAL and Shadow. Sir, Riley said softly to the seal, we're going to verify what happened. No assumptions. No accusations. Just clarity. He nodded weakly, stroking Shadow's neck, eyes exhausted but trusting her. Mendes played the footage. The pier flickered onto the screen, fog curling, officers approaching. The seal hunched over the bench. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't the man, it was Shadow. From the first second, the shepherd wasn't confused. He wasn't acting like a police canine guarding public space. He was staring at the seal, locked in. Focused. Recognizing Riley leaned in. Eyes widening. Pause it, she whispered. On screen. Shadow was trembling, not with fear, not with aggression, but with something unmistakably emotional. His tail moved the moment he saw the seal, barely. Subtly but enough. Rewind 3 seconds. Holt said. They watched again. Same reaction. Same recognition. Dempsey rubbed his forehead. Holy hell. He knew him before we even got close. The next part hit even harder. The footage showed the moment Dempsey's Malinois charged. But before the dog could reach the seal, Shadow broke free, not to fight, not to flee, but to block the attack. To protect the man he loved. The seal closed his eyes. Overwhelmed, Riley exhaled shakily. There's no denying it now. This bond, this history, it's real. Holt stood silent for a long moment, the truth sinking deeper than any protocol. Finally, he spoke, voice solemn, almost humbled. This dog wasn't following training. He glanced at the seal and Shadow. He was following his heart. The footage made one thing undeniable. This wasn't a crime. This was a reunion fate had forced apart and finally brought back together. The fog began to thin as the morning sun tried to push through, casting a pale glow across the pier, soft, almost symbolic, as if the world itself sensed what was about to happen. Sergeant Holt took a slow breath, the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. Protocol said one thing, procedure said another. But what he had just witnessed, what everyone had witnessed, was something no rulebook had prepared him for. He stepped toward the seal and Shadow, stopping just a few feet away. Sir, Holt said, voice steady but gentler than anyone had ever heard from him. What you told us, what we saw on that footage, it changes things. The seal held Shadow a little tighter, fear flickering back into his eyes. Are you taking him away? Shadow pressed closer, sensing the panic. Holt lifted a hand, palm open, not as a sergeant, but as a man finally understanding the truth. No, he said quietly. I'm not here to take anything from you. Riley stepped beside Holt, her eyes warm. You two were separated by a system that didn't care about the bond you share. But we saw it today. Every moment of it. The seal swallowed hard, voice trembling. So, what happens now? Holt exchanged a glance with his team. For once, the entire unit seemed united, not by training, but by compassion. Shadow has served this department with honor, Holt began. He's prevented crimes, protected officers, and saved civilians. He's done everything asked of him. Shadow looked up at the seal, tail thumping faintly. But there's one thing we can't ignore, Holt continued. His heart was never here. It never belonged to us. It belonged to you. The seal's breath caught. Riley stepped forward, smiling. We're filing the paperwork today. Effective immediately. Shadow is retired from police duty. Holt nodded firmly. And he's going home with you. The seal's face crumpled with overwhelming emotion. He buried his face into Shadow's fur as the officers looked on, some smiling, some wiping away tears, all silently moved. For the first time in years, the seal wasn't broken. He was whole again. The officers stepped back, giving the seal and Shadow space the world had stolen from them for far too long. The sun finally pierced through the fog, laying warm light over the battered soldier and the loyal dog pressed against him. It felt like the first sunlight in years. Riley smiled softly. Take your time. You two deserve this moment. The seal wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Though the tears kept coming, he wrapped both arms around Shadow, pulling him in close, not out of desperation this time, but out of relief. Shadow leaned into him with a deep sigh, his tail sweeping gently across the wooden boards. For the first time since they'd arrived, the seal stood on his feet. His legs trembled, but Shadow was right there, steadying him just like he had on the battlefield. Holt stepped forward, extending a hand. Take good care of him, he said. He's earned his peace. The seal shook his hand firmly, emotion thick in his voice. I will, I promise. He saved my life long before today. Shadow gazed up at him with warm, knowing eyes, as if aware of every word. The officers gathered near the railing, watching in respectful silence as the seal and Shadow began walking slowly down the pier, side by side, step by step, their silhouettes framed by golden light. Tourists who had once feared the scene now smiled through tears. Some even clapped quietly. Others simply watched, touched by a loyalty deeper than any badge or uniform. As they reached the end of the pier, the seal paused, resting a hand on Shadow's head. Come on, buddy, he whispered. Let's go home. Shadow nudged his hand, tail wagging not with excitement, but with understanding. The two of them walked forward, disappearing into the sunlight, reunited partners, broken pieces finally made whole again. And everyone who witnessed it that morning left with the same realization: loyalty can be trained. But love like that, it's born on the battlefield and never forgotten.